subatomic particles or mechanistic explanations. All of it is explained in terms of this competition between wills within us, within everything else. And that explains why everything is in a flux, because you never know what will is going to win. So he's when he talks about science, he's appreciative of it, but he's also quite critical. So he says that he drew this analogy that just like if you have a musical symphony, just like making a calculative analysis of that is completely useless, making a calculative analysis of life is just as useless, of the world is just as useless. So he saw life and the world very similar to music, or similar artistic forms, which is why he was a big fan in certain ways of Wagner and other German musicians of the time. So that was his understanding of science. And he makes one point which was very interesting, which is that science might be able to do a lot of things, but it cannot create values. So, for instance, there was a recent paper that I read which kind of tied in with this, which was that science can never justify itself. So if you say science is good, then you have to explain why science is good. Or you can come up with any reason. Say science alleviates poverty. Why is that good? You can never use scientific reasoning to explain why alleviating poverty is good. There is something else required, and that something else is values. There is an evaluative judgment that you need to make, and you can never get that through science, so you need those values to keep science going. So science is a tool within this bigger value judgment system, according to him. Also this is kind of a deviation from the whole thing, but there was an interesting part where I don't know how many of you have heard of Descartes' statement. So Descartes said that he was always skeptical of everything. This was a French philosopher, he was skeptical of everything, which is that nothing can be true, and he kept questioning absolutely everything, but then he arrived at one statement which he thought was true. No matter what else is true or untrue, this one statement is always true, which was, I think, therefore I am. And Nietzsche uses, certain words to ridicule Descartes for this, and the main point of his criticism is that look at the conceit that this man has. He's saying, I think, and he thinks that this is, and he says that this is a universal, absolutely true statement. That's ridiculous, because how do you know, A, how do you know what thinking is? How is thinking different from everything else? And B, more importantly, how do you know that you're the one thinking? Why is it not that thoughts are thinking you? And to be very honest, like if you sit down, do you really exercise control over your thoughts? I know I don't. They just keep coming, and I don't know if they're mine or where they're coming from. But that's exactly what Nietzsche said, that this is completely flawed. All of Western universal statements are all flawed, and that's how he lays down critique on Descartes and also a lot on Kant. Because Kant was the one person who came to universal statements, lots of universal statements. He came to something called universal morality, something called the categorical imperative, where he says that, very simply explained, it's you're supposed to treat the other person in a way that you, on the premise that you believe that they have reason. So you don't have to treat them as a tool, as a means, but as an end. So these were the universal kind of morality statements that Kant came up with, which still persist. But Nietzsche completely went against all of them and said that's nonsense. That's just one man giving his morality and trying to impose it on everyone else. Why should your morality be my morality or anyone else's? So he called this actually dictatorship of the worst kind, which philosophers practice, which is that you come up with your own morality and then you want everyone else to follow it. And he thinks that's very, very dictatorial. Anyway, so this is his, like, the will to power is his solution to this, this valuelessness that the world has now come to, or will come to. And he contrasts it with the Buddhist understanding of it, which is just, okay, let's create something new. But I feel that there is a lot of resemblance in the solution that Nietzsche provides, and the one that is, if I can even call it a solution, that is provided in Buddhism. How so? Okay, so the first is that he talks of transformation in man. He thinks that right now we're at the stage of a camel. We're weak, we're followers, so that he sees humanity right now in the stage of a camel. It's Nietzsche. And then slowly it will transform to the state of a lion. And then you will break against everything, become rebellious, fight against absolutely everything and thrash all the values, opinions, and everything set forth till date. And then there's going to be another transformation, which is going to be the final and ultimate one, which is going to be the lion to a child. And that's really strange. Why would you go from a lion to a child? Because that state of a child is very similar to the Buddhist state of nirvana. And the way he describes it and explains it, the two states are very, very similar. And that's exactly what he was going for. But the problem was that he didn't know how. So he had this understanding and he knew something was missing and he had this conception of where to go, but he didn't know how at all, which was why, well, he went crazy. He terms this as self-overcoming, so overcoming yourself, or which is also similar to the Buddhist idea of kind of getting rid of your ego. And ego not in the sense that, not the Freudian sense, but just whatever understanding you have of yourself, what are you really? I mean, if you come to think of it, our ideas, our thoughts that we think to be our own, are they really our own? Or are they just something that were given to us by society, by outside forces, by triggers, by whatever else, and then we think that they're ours? Similarly with emotions, you know, you feel angry, you feel sad, you feel happy. Is that yours? Do you exercise any control over that either? Or is that also triggered by something outside? So, after you get rid of all of this, what remains? Not that I know, but whatever remains, that is the you. That is the process of self-overcoming, getting rid of this idea that you have of yourself, which is something that Nietzsche talks about quite often. So the problem comes down to now that he has understood that there is a valuelessness now, after construction of these values and understanding that there are none, and now you have a state of valuelessness. But the problem is that he did not know of any method whatsoever to overcome it. And he was critical of Buddhism and Hinduism and a lot of other Eastern philosophies as well. But I think if he had actually been able to penetrate through them and understand their methods, he might have found a lot of resemblance there, and found a lot of just methods to reach this Übermensch, or this new transformation of values that he kept talking of for so long. And there was a statement that I found from, I think it was Foucault. Where is it? Okay, yeah. It says that if they were in a conversation, if Nietzsche and Buddha were in a conversation, then Buddha would reply to Nietzsche upon hearing his entire story about transformation of values and so on, that we have known this for the past 2,500 years. It is you, Nietzsche, who are only just beginning to catch on. that was an interesting one. So yeah, the Buddhist philosophy, which he termed as escapist, which, to be honest, the way it operates right now, certainly in India, is very escapist. But that's, of course, you know, there's a history of 2,500 years of interpretation and lots of intermediaries coming in. Just like Christianity has gone through so many intermediaries and interpretations and understandings. And the way it works now is complete renunciation of this world. So if, say, you're poor, then, well, you're not really poor, because it's the material world. So this isn't the real world. There's another world out there. This is the way it's treated, and that's why poverty is prevalent, because it's not real. That's how Buddhism and Hinduism have come to understand it. And maybe that's why the Western understanding of it was the way it was at one point. But Buddha, I think, would respond by saying that everyone else is an escapist, because everyone else is so scared. I mean, you try spending time with yourself, just by yourself. Sit down in a room without doing anything. Don't touch your computer, don't write anything, just you. You can't. After a while, you just won't be able to, because you're the one escaping from yourself, not Buddha. He's the one actually facing himself. You're facing this other idea that you've constructed about yourself, and you think that is the